Hello and welcome to this video. This video is going to be very quickly talking about the new features available in iNav 1.6 that was released on the 28th of February. Now iNav have committed to release a new version of iNav every 2 months. So the last one was just before the end of 2016 and we've just got the last one at the end of February, and the next one is due for I think the 30th of April. So amazingly the team are sticking to their timeline. But what I want to do in this video is very quickly show you the new features in 1.6 and go through some of the release notes. So for those of you that might have been watching the iNav 1.5 series, you can watch this stuff and figure out what the changes are and what benefits there are to upgrading to iNav 1.6 if you've already tried 1.5. Now this is the new interface. You'll notice we have a couple of new tabs here on the left hand side. So let's go through the notes as they appear in GitHub. So here's the 1.6 release notes. First one is CLI parameter renaming. So some of the stuff that was called nav alt is now being standardized so you can see exactly which type of craft this CLI command is applicable to. MC is multicopter and FW is fixed wing. So there are a couple of differences. Now this does mean that you can't just export and re-import the settings that you're using. You do have to be aware of that. Next thing on the list that have changed is now there's non-volatile storage for waypoint missions. Now this is a pretty big deal. Now with things like Easy GUI on Android and other applications as well, you can now upload a set of waypoints into iNav just like you can with things like Pixhawk and APM, and then by using the stick combos you can actually save the current waypoint mission into non-volatile memory and also recall it as well. So that means that you can set up the flight that you want to do before you go to the field, and then once you're at the field you can turn everything on, load those mission waypoints and off you go. Now in the previous versions you had to load the waypoints into the flight controller while it was up and booted and ready to rock and roll, and then you could go and fly. With this, it provides a lot more flexibility. Now I'm talking to the developers of Easy GUI at the moment, and we'll probably do a video in the future showing how to use this feature with something like a Bluetooth adapter with Easy GUI, so you can update waypoints, load them into iNav and then go and fly autonomously. There is a new failsafe system as well. Failsafe stage 1 has completely gone. So let me just show you what that looks like. So now if we go into failsafe, then you can see that the channel fallback settings, there aren't any. So anything that starts to go wrong is immediately considered as a failsafe condition, and you can decide what you want to do: drop, land, or return to home. Now this is an extension of what has happening in version 1.5, and we talked a little bit about that, about how 1.5 already started to treat anything that went wrong as a real failsafe, but with this it's kind of showing that that's the case inside the GUI itself. If we jump back to the notes, there is a new PIFF controller for fixed wing aircraft. Now this is a pretty big deal, to be honest. I'm going to do an entire separate video on this, but PIFF stands for proportional, integral and feed forward. It is a much better way to control the control surfaces and movement of a fixed wing model rather than a PID loop, which tends to be overly aggressive and doesn't take into account the slowness of the reaction of something like a fixed wing plane versus an electronic speed controller. So that has now been introduced in 1.6. I'll link here in the top right hand corner to the video when that's released as well, and you can go and find all about that because I explain it in a little bit more detail. There has been some changes to the airplane launch mode improvements. Now if we jump into the graphical user interface and have a look at the different modes that are available, you'll notice it isn't here, and that is because by default the type of craft that is configured is this little guy here. It's set up by default for a quad X. So we have to change that to be a plane, and then we get the ability to do the auto launch stuff. Now airplane launch mode is great. What you do is you select launch mode, you then arm the board, you increase the throttle to the amount of throttle you want when the auto launch is configured, and you chuck the plane into the air. It'll detect that you've thrown it, power up everything and climb steadily for 5 seconds, which is the defaults. However, they've made some changes now. So now you can specify an idle throttle for pre-launch. So rather than the prop spin up from completely still, it can be ticking away and then it'll ramp up. And you can also pick how long that ramp up time is as well. It even allows to have the motor spinning even if you've got the motor stop feature turned on. Personally, I think this is a great idea because it is a little bit aggressive going from zero throttle to launch throttle, which usually is something like about 1700, the value for the ESC for the motor. That's a heck of a jump to go in one, and it will provide a much smoother flight, and it'll be able to spin up that a little bit faster as well. There's some waypoint mission pre-arming done, there's some return to home sanity checking, there's new return to home configuration options, which is what is going to happen when it gets home, and that's whether or not it's going to try and land or not. And they have introduced some new code in here so that a plane or a fixed wing model will try and auto land as well, although that needs a little bit more testing. There's some new navigation specific OSD indicators. We have been playing with the OSD on our little fixed wing here and really love it. The fact that we can now have things like the GPS coordinates and also things like the home distance and direction, fantastic. I've been waiting for that. That means I can fly around an FPV, have a wonderful time, and always know which way I need to fly home in case I get a little bit disorientated, or if all else fails, I can flick it in GPS return to home, the craft will fly back to me automatically, and I can just be along for the ride. There are some new boards as well. The Naze target has been split into a couple of different ones. There is the first initial support for the Pix Racer, which is very exciting as well, and we're starting to see some F4 targets too. There's loads of new features. I'm not going to read these out. You can have a look at these in the notes. I'll put a link to these notes in the description itself, and there's a ton of bugs fixed as well. But let me show you a couple of other cool things in the settings menu. You'll notice in here that we have something now called presets. Now presets allow the automatic selection of some of the basic configuration options depending on what you're picking here on the left. Now in 1.5 in the video that we've done so far, an awful lot of that was very manual, and the way you use these is you first of all go into setup, make sure that you've reset settings so anything that you had changed has been destroyed, go into presets and then pick the preset that you want. So for me, something like a 600mm flying wing is something that I'm using iNav on a lot. My Tech Sumos are flying great with it. And you can see here that it's going to do things like adjust my PIDs, adjust my rates, and adjust the gyro filtering as well. If I apply that, it'll give me a warning to say, are you sure? Make sure that these aren't treated as final values, but entry points for final tuning. Click save and reboot. The board will bounce. When it comes back, we are now a flying wing. And things like the LPF frequencies are all set, things like the PID tuning are also done as well. And in fact, for those of you that have gone and watched the PIFF video, hopefully these numbers will make a little bit more sense and you realise that why the proportional value has dropped so significantly. So in summary, there's quite a lot of changes in version 1.6 that will be interesting to pilots of both multi-rotors and particularly fixed wing as well. And there's also been quite a few changes on things like the new features and the bugs fixed too. So hopefully that's interesting for those of you that are iNav pilots like myself. It's definitely worthwhile going and having a look at 1.6 if you're already flying 1.5 or an older version. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. We try and release at least 2 videos a week, usually a quick tip on a Tuesday and a more in-depth video on a Friday, and sometimes we manage to get a few more out as well. If you're interested in radio control, then the playlists are useful to have a look at. Anything that's called Introduction To is an organised set of videos that teach you from first principles about the subject that you're interested in. But we also have information about the majority of popular open source flight controllers, how to build quadcopters, fixed wing models, reviews, setups, unboxing, all kinds of things in here as well. So if you haven't already had a look at the playlist, then I'd recommend going and have a look through here to see if there's anything that takes your fancy. Finally, we do also provide updates through things like Twitter, Instagram, and also post all of our 3D designs on Thingiverse as well. So if you like what we're doing here on YouTube, have a look at those things and subscribe to us there, and you'll find out what we're up to in advance of the videos coming out here on the channel.